Hello and welcome to episode 146 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, as always, Damien Fay and me, Andy Leakes. Damien, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm very good, Andy. I'm. Do you know what? I've got to tell you about what I've just been doing because I'm slightly buzzing because we're doing this again. It's quite late on a what day is it? Thursday. Late on a Thursday night. I'm losing track. Yeah, I don't know what day it is at all. And I've just come back from a bat walk, right? And there's a local park near us that had a free bat walk. So they had these obviously conservationists who come around and do a talk about bats and the different type of bats you get in public spaces and in the park. And it's just like a normal park with trees and a big open playing space and kids climbing frames. And obviously it was aimed at the children and families. So you go along there for free with your wellies on, and it was dusk. So by the time they were talking through different types of bats, it was getting dark. But they gave you bat meters, so little bat detectors, and it could find the frequency of the bats. So you could hear them clicking and doing their echolocation. That's the term. And you can hear it clicking and you see the bats flying around. It blew my mind. It was brilliant. And my 7-year-old loved it. So I've come back from that, basically taken my wellies off and chucked them to one side and then come and recorded the podcast. So, yeah, I mean, it makes it sound like I'm some country bumpkin, but obviously I'm living in southeast London. I only wore the wellies to avoid the copious amounts of dog poo that obviously exists in our parks. But, yeah, it was brilliant. Would you have expected me to say I'd done that tonight, Andy? You wouldn't, would you?
No, certainly not. I wouldn't have expected you to come up with that. We've got a few bats in our area, actually. I see them swooping down. Did I ever tell you about the time that a bat came into our bedroom?
No, I don't think you have, Andy.
It doesn't sound like you want me to either.
No, I didn't. The reason I'm laughing, because this could go anywhere, this story, couldn't it? I just, knowing you as well as I do, just tell me the story anyway.
The story is very simple. Wife went upstairs, ready to go to bed, come running down the stairs. She was heavily pregnant at the time, and said, there's a bat in our room. I didn't believe her, turned on the light, screamed like a girl, and chaos ensued for about 4 hours while a pregnant lady sort of screamed and a beast man screamed even louder.
So if you'd have filmed that, Andy, you'd have been viral. There's the Irish one the other day. It went viral. A couple of Irish guys trying to get a bat out of a kitchen. So we could have had you, Andy. It would have probably been even funnier, you running around the kitchen. Next time I get my cats bring in a mouse or a rat like they've done in the past. I know people don't like to talk about, pretend they don't have these things, but obviously I've mentioned, I think, before on the podcast, I'm prone to dancing around the kitchen in my marigolds and wellies, trying to get rid of any rodents that the cat won't kill. So yeah, maybe I should film myself and appear on YouTube. But yeah.
Right, enough sort of rodents and bat. Actually, what is a bat? A bat isn't a rodent. What are they classed as?
They're mammals.
Mammals.
They're the only flying mammal, Andy. There you go. A fact I've learnt tonight. On just a complete aside, just for people out there as well, on free things that your kids can do, which is always interesting. If you go join these local Facebook groups, which there are loads of them for parenting, and I'm not massively into Facebook and do lots of Facebook groups or anything, but my wife does. That's how she found out about this particular one in a local park, and it was free. But the other thing I did this week, I took my eldest daughter to football training, and the FA are doing. There's an incentive to try and get girls into football, and it was basically free lessons to play football attached to an existing club that is obviously mostly boys, but there is a girls football teams as well. And I just mention it because they are obviously going around across the country. And I'm not one of these guys who's trying to force his daughter to play football. You've got to try and let your kids try these things and not stereotype them into being girls and therefore not liking football or anything. Because she actually said to me the only reason she's not tried it because she gets intimidated by the boys where they play at school. So anyway, just a throwaway thing that if you look around, there are some free things to do with kids, not just being tight or anything, but there was obviously that bat thing I did this week, but the football training is regularly free. It's just a shame there's not that many girls that go, because we went, and bearing in mind I live in southeast London, so the catchment area for this thing is quite big. There were 10 girls out there. This covers an age range from between 5 and 9, so she enjoyed it, she loved it, So anyway, it was just another aside. There's plenty of stuff out there that you can do for free, because I tell you what, Andy, as you probably appreciate, the cost of classes for your kids is extortionate.
I know, which is why I took my daughter to the football a few weeks ago now. We've got a girls' club, part of the boys' club in our village, and it's called the Kitty Hawks, and they go out there, and they're brilliant. The girls are really, really strong, as are the boys, actually, for a small village. Charlotte, my daughter, kicked the ball around for about 5 minutes, then started chatting to her friend, put her hands in her pockets. She had like a hoodie on, and after about 10 minutes she was over picking daisies on the other side of the field. I thought, no, this isn't for her. So funny enough, with a friend of hers called Daisy. So yeah, no, that wasn't fair, but it was good fun, and at least I gave it a chance. And
that's what it's all about, it's giving them the chance,
Yeah.
isn't it, Andy?
Right, what do we got money wise this week? Let's move it on.
Let's move it on. The money wise, I promised last week, do you remember we talked about a guy in America who'd come up with his 9 money rules that went viral, because he'd basically done a podcast interview, claimed that there was an index card with the key rules of money on there, and you could find it in your local library. It wasn't actually true. I don't think he was being deceptive, but of course everybody wanted to know what the card was and what the rules were, and so he had to create it quickly. So I said last week, I went through it, someone asked me my opinion, I gave my opinion on the rules that were on that card, but then I promised I would do my own. And I don't like to back out of a promise, so after my bat walk, I've been inspired, and I've come up with my own rules and my own thoughts about money and about how to run it. So this is what you're going to get here, is a bit of an insight into me and the way I look at things. And do you know what, Andy? When I started this, I could have gone anywhere with it. There's so much stuff. You think about when with Money to the Masses, we've been doing this for 7.5 years, 150 odd nearly podcast shows, God knows how many thousand articles. The amount of content and expertise we could have drilled down is quite mind-boggling. So I was sitting there thinking that what do I focus on? What are the key ingredients? And then something struck me. I don't know what it was where this popped into my mind, but many moons ago I went to NCT group. So Money to the Masses was inspired by my eldest daughter's birth. That's how I kind of sparked the idea. And funnily enough, when she was born, just before we went to the NCT, now I can't remember what NCT stands for.
No.
Yeah, for those who don't know, it's you pay for these classes and couples go there.
It's a club you go to where you try and do a bit of one-upmanship for about 6 to 8 weeks before you realise there's a couple of weirdos that you'll never speak to again, and there's a few people that you might talk to about birth problems.
Yeah, and do you know what? Andy has summed it up, because what it's meant to be is you go to somebody's house, and there will be, say, 6 couples who all paid to be there for this 6-week course, and there's a woman who probably is an ex-midwife who sits there and tells you all about what's going to happen in this birthing situation, how you can help your wife, as if you really can, but obviously you can try and offer some sort of help. All these breathing techniques. Look, you look at lots of pictures of babies coming out of women's bits, and you also sit there in a room with 6 couples that you probably don't have a lot in common, and you're all thrown in, and you therefore make friends. And it's an interesting thing. I've had lots of mixed messages about, or reviews of it, and we're still in touch with some of the couples that we went with. And it just, one of the things that came out of that I would say that was really positive was that the woman who did it, she gave a list of the things to check when your baby cries. Now, we all know this. If you're a parent, you will know this, that you have a newborn and you think, what the hell am I going to do with this baby? And it starts to cry, and you go, what's wrong with it? They can't talk. So what you do is, she gave a list of things to go through. So you check, are they hungry? Are they, do they need their nappy changed? Do they need burping? And you go all the way through this cycle. Are they sick? And that's one of the last ones. And then when you get to the bottom, if you haven't resolved the issue or found which issue it is, you start at the top again. You keep going down. It's a brilliant, it stuck with me. It was a brilliant way of trying to resolve a baby crying. And now I thought, well, let me try and apply the same principle or idea to money, and how I would, my view on money and how I would run money, and therefore kind of rules of running money. So I'm going to go into this. Now the way I look at it when I start to run money or look at my own finances, I try and build a process. And by that, I mean a set of almost instructions, but almost an algorithm to run through that you can use time and time again that tries to take some of the emotion out of money, because unfortunately money is a very emotional thing and you get tied up with it. So what I do is try and create a process, whether it's investing or trying to sort my money out. So the first rule I would say to people is divide and conquer. And this principle is down to the idea that if you can't quantify something and you can't measure it, then you've got no chance of controlling it. So the first thing I would do is that you need to know how much you spend, and by that I don't mean sitting down and with statements and working out where all your money goes. There are plenty of apps that do it. There are even banking apps that will tell you where your money goes each month. So you quantify what you're doing. Then the idea is you then zone your money. We did a podcast. If you look through the past podcast episodes, there's one that mentioned the word zoning, but I'll touch upon it again. I'm a real advocate of this, and what you need to do, how I would try and overcome a problem, is to break it down into small parts. Now, if you look at your money and you look at your bank account, there's all this stuff flying in and out. You're never going to resolve that, whether you've got issues with debt or you're trying to pay your bills or reduce your bills. There's just too much going on. There's too many moving parts, and the system is rigged for you to fail because the bank wants you to go overdrawn. There's too many ways in which they can try and sell you products. So what you need to do is break it down into its constituent parts. So what I would do is, once you've quantified everything, you then need to work out budgets for each section. Whether it's food, that's how much you can afford. Whether it's bills, how much you can afford, your rent, and then set up individual accounts or buckets that you can put that money into. You automate that. You then start setting up direct debits. Like I said, go back and listen to the past podcast when I go into detail, but set up standing orders or direct debits that put your money into different accounts. So what happens is you have an account for everything: an account for your mortgage, an account for your food bill, an account for your general frivolous spending, and therefore you only use the accounts, the cards, when you need them for the relevant thing. So your mortgage, you won't even use a card on that, you'll just tear it up. So your money drops in there and it pays your mortgage. It makes sure everything gets taken care of. And this gets onto a very important thing, that a general money rule is try and automate everything. You can almost automate nearly everything to do with money these days. So like that, your money hits your account from your pay packet, it gets sent out and split into different pots. You may not have to have lots of accounts, you may be able to control it yourself, but trust me, it's far easier if you do. Then once you've done that, you're under control and you can then get your budgeting in order. Now, when you automate things and things are getting paid, you're then in control. This then takes me on to the next rule of my series. I'm going to say there's about 10 of these that I've pinned down. And Andy, jump in when you want and say, well, what about this? And if there's anything I've forgotten, because I've pulled these together relatively quickly. But the next rule I always try and do is, it's not about money. It's trying to think about money in a slightly different way, but think of time. And time, as we've said before, is the greatest power in the universe. It's unstoppable. You can't stop it. We're all going to get old. The universe is going to keep aging and expanding. What you want to do is you can automate your money, and you automate the way you make money, or you automate the way you look after it or grow it. Then if you embed time into that, then you're going to get there. So let's give you an example. If somebody's got debts, then they need to repay them. If they build themselves a repayment plan of how much they're going to pay, then that problem becomes shelved, because if they work out it's £50 a month, it's going to take them 3-4 years to clear their debt. As long as they stick to the plan and it's automated, the money goes into their account, it goes into that, siphoned out into the account that's going to pay that credit card, and it's done. It's guaranteed. That after a matter of time, that problem will be solved. It will get there, or they'll die, in which case it won't matter. But the thing is, time is, by automating it and putting time in there, you will get to where you want to be. In a more positive vein, you can actually take that with investing. So you have a plan, you're trying to get to somewhere, then you invest a certain amount over a particular period of time. And again, it embeds, if it's at £10 a month, if it's £100 a month or more, then you'll eventually get there by doing something regularly and embedding time into it. And one of the powerful things of doing that, it starts to make you focus a bit more about targets and achieving them in terms of time frames. Because one of the flaws about money is that, or financial planning, is everyone talks about their retirement as this point in life in the future, this nirvana we're going to get to. And we mentioned once before that I had an experience where meeting a chap who basically almost killed over as soon as he retired.
Ex-postman, wasn't he?
He was a postman. He was an ex-postman. And if you want to go in for financial freedom, that can be retirement for a lot of people. But if you give yourself a time frame, then that gives you something to aim towards. And then once you've got a time frame, you can work backwards to try and achieve what you're after. And the final thing to do with time is that I try and embed this. If you've got a career that you're going through, then try and embed an element of time into it, because I don't mean in terms of dead man's shoes by just sitting there and waiting for the next promotion. It's about the fact that if you can do exams, or there's qualifications you can do, or there are certain tasks you need to do in order to achieve, to be able to move forward in there, then make sure you do them, because then by default you will start to be able to move up the scale of your career, because there's obviously going to be a threshold which you breach. If you're more qualified, you'll probably earn more. So it's always trying to get that contingency plan. That bare minimum is going to drag you through life, and you're going to get there in the end. The next rule is, it's kind of a function of happiness really, but it's managing expectations, and it's stop trying to keep up with the Joneses. A lot of the stuff to do with money is about people trying to appear wealthy, or unfortunately in England we have this real thing about class, and I personally loathe anything to do with class, and that might be because of my upbringing on a council estate, but I just think it's not really that. I just think I don't like inequality in people trying to feel inadequate in any way when they compare themselves to somebody else, because the reality is a lot of people have stuff on credit. So when you look at your neighbour and he may be driving a really nice car, chances are he doesn't actually own that, and he's paying for it on credit, because obviously that's the way the economy is fueled. So manage your expectations. You're going to be far happier in life, and you're going to achieve probably your dreams in terms of freedom and with money far easier if you manage what really makes you happy. Like, look more inward than outward. So you won't need to live off as much money. You won't need as much money to live the lifestyle that you probably would be quite happy with when you look at it. Stop trying to live somebody else's lifestyle. And the other thing on that, just to quickly touch upon, when you're managing expectations and trying to tame the sort of enthusiasms that you have, that I always still think that the kind of 2-day rule when you try and buy something is always a good one to adhere to, because we all get carried away. Maybe it's a new iPhone and whatever it is, and if you give yourself 48 hours to think about it and cool down, and then if you really want it, then buy it. Because trust me, I'm not the kind of guy who tells people to have to live the life of a monk or anything like that, but we're all our worst enemies, aren't we?
Yep, absolutely. That's one I'm still learning to this day, and probably where I fall down most, actually, the 48-hour rule. I don't often make purchases, but when I do, they're impulse purchases, and they're generally quite expensive, so I still need to learn by that. It's a good one.
The next rule, we're looking at about number 3 here, and this puts me in direct opposition to Martin Lewis. I think people should focus more on making money than saving it, and it's more about how to get more money than trying to literally just cut bills all the time. Now, that can be a pay rise, so try and get the pay rise, or you need to build a cash machine. We touched upon that, I think, in the last podcast, and by that I mean you need to work out a way that you're going to produce enough money to achieve the lifestyle you want. And one of the best ways is always going to be a business, and to build some form of business or side project that can generate some extra revenue for you. Because the problem with a job, and I know I was always employed for years and years, but the problem with a job is you're never paid what you're worth by definition. Because if you were, why would you think about it? If you had a company, why would you pay someone more than they're worth? Because it doesn't make sense, does it? You're going to pay them a value, a wage, but you're always going to be, there's going to be a limit on how much someone will pay you, because why pay you more if you're only going to do the same job? If you're not going to do any more when they pay you more, why would they? And so what happens is, I've never found it in my career, and I've never really known anyone else to see it any differently, that when you hand your notice in, you always find that they try and keep you by saying they'll give you a pay rise, which always amazes me, because I find that almost doubly insulting that someone would offer you a pay rise only when you left. So your value to them was only therefore expressed by you saying you didn't want to work with them. When you were working hard, you weren't given a pay rise. But that is a general, that's just life. So I think people should need to focus on growing that pot, that revenue stream, because one of the issues I have with money saving all the time is that it's a law of diminishing returns. So the first time you do it, the first time you save money on an energy bill, you might knock off £200 and you'll be high-fiving everybody and you'll be writing it on Facebook and you will be, I've got a vision of running down the street high-fiving people in the houses or whatever. But the reality is the next time you pull that trick, you won't save as much. You'll save a far smaller amount. And so you can't keep doing it. You're going to get less and less. So at some point you need to aspire to have more money. And it may sound when I'm saying this, well, that's obvious. That's easier said than done. But it's not really, because there are always side projects that you can create, like blogs and etc. And the One Giant Leap podcast series is all about that. But it could be about trying to get a pay rise. And one of the things, this leads quite nicely into my next rule or law, is number 4, is focus on value. Now, focus on value in every way, I mean that. So, firstly on costs, okay? When you're buying something, you're always going to go for the cheapest. That's what people try and tell you. So Martin Lewis will go, yeah, get the cheapest. If you're investing, buy the cheapest trackers, all these things. I think what people need to do is focus on value more than cost. Because if something is more expensive than the... So let's say you had 2 funds. If one is more expensive than the other, but the more expensive one produces far greater results after charges, then why would you opt for the cheaper one? And that is part of what 80/20 Investor is also about. It's about identifying that. It's not just using a simple rule like going for the cheapest. I did the research and it actually shows that doesn't actually work. Just going for the cheapest all the time if you want the best returns. But just going for the cheapest is the simple answer. So if you can't do the work or you haven't got the time, people just go for the cheapest. But it isn't always the best idea. So focus on value. So if you're going to buy anything, what's the value it adds? If you deem it, value is a very personal thing. So what you might value, Andy, might be completely different to what I value. So I could go and see something. The value I place on an object will be very different to you. And part of the thing that I try and get people to think about is to work out your hourly rate. Now, everybody, I believe, should know what their hourly or day rate, let's say day rate, of employment or what they earn. So their net pay, not their gross, what they actually take home. So what happens, if you know how much you earn in a single day, then if you see an object that you think, I want that, then you're sitting there thinking, do you know what, I've got to do that job I hate for a day and a half to acquire that thing. Do you know what, I don't really need it. It's kind of another variation almost on something to try and delay you buying things. But if you apply that value rule, then it starts also making you realise, do you know what, I do really want that. So I need to actually earn more. And it starts trying to push people to thinking about how much they earn, and leading on to that value idea that I said to do with jobs. When you have a job, it's always about value. It's not necessarily about the money. So if you go to a boss and say, I want a pay rise, he'll probably sit there and look at it and go, no, I don't want to give you a pay rise. But if you can prove the value you add to somebody before you even enter the room for the discussion, you're far greater chance of getting that pay rise. If you can show them the value you add to their company and the value by giving you an extra pay rise, what that brings, you'll be very hard pushed to find a boss that wouldn't be swayed by that argument, because you could then turn it around on them and say, look, if you were me in this situation, I could show you that I was adding more value than what you're paying me, blah blah blah. They would be very hard for them to turn around and say, do you know what, Damien, just suck it up. If they did, then you've got to leave. So the whole value thing is also important. It's not just about what you spend, and it's not about when you invest, but it's also about when I believe about when you're building businesses. The whole business world kind of works on value generation. So if you imagine there's somebody who does a job and he might be painting and decorating, that's deemed as having a value to somebody, and that value may be, I don't know, whatever, a couple £100 a day or whatever it is, the going rate these days. But if you can then provide some value to the carpenter, that, for example, that's why there's services out there that provide clients, the checker trade and things like that. These people will pay to be members of that because there's a value to that membership, because the value that the checker trade provides and the clients is far greater than the cost of it. So everything's about you providing greater value, more value. It's like these podcasts, we do them, try and create more value. I know they're free, but the more value you can create in something, the more people are going to like it and they're going to come back. So I just think the general rule is always focus on value in every way when you're looking at money, whether it's just spending it or acquiring it. Then the next rule I'd go with, Andy, is on the build front. I know I said about don't obsess about focus more on growing it, but obviously you've got to try and save money on bills. And the way I would do this is everyone looks at this again as a bit of a Mount Everest. I've got this huge amount of bills. My general rule of thumb I would go with is only try and do one a month. And if you do, and if you've done the great switch that has saved you loads of money, then if you can knock off 5 to 10% off a bill in a year, because don't forget, that is still going to be a decent size over time. If you could do that on all of them over a year, so you're only doing one a month, and some of them you won't be able to knock off any money, that's equivalent to almost getting a 5 to 10% pay rise. If you keep doing that year on year, don't forget there's inflation that are pushing these up as well. So it's going to be difficult to do. So that's why you're not going to be disheartened when you don't halve your gas bill every year. But that's the general rule I would always go with. Always try and do one a month. The next thing I would go on, Andy, is credit. Okay, and if I was in charge of the Oxford English Dictionary, not only probably would it be full of more swear words than it is now. I don't mean that in the. I know I don't swear on the podcast. I do desperately try not to, but and more slang expressions from my upbringing. But I would also ban the use or limit the definition of the word credit. I hate the word credit because the word credit, when it applied to credit cards, is the idea, it's always got positive connotations. So you were able to pay, we gave him credit because he was well off enough to be able to pay it. Credit cards, it's debt. We should just change it. So these are debt cards, okay? So you're using this card because you can't afford to pay for something. That's not a positive. You can't afford it. So I would therefore use them as they're intended as cash flow mechanisms. Don't buy things on them that isn't for cash flow. So your boiler breaks up, that's why you would use a credit. If we could try and get to that, it's not easy. I mean, we all fall down on it. I'm not going to say I'm no different to anybody else, but try and use, if you apply it, is this a cash flow issue why I'm using it, or is this just because I want to go away on holiday? And never, as a general, buy perishable stuff on credit card. Because one of the things I see people buy their lunch on their credit card, by the time they've digested it and the sandwich has gone out and gone down to Thames Water's toilet and they're sort of sorting it out down there, you're still going to be paying off the interest on that sandwich probably for the next year or more. And I know that people who use reward cards, I don't like reward cards. I just don't. I think the system's rigged to help you fail. That's why they give you enticing reward cards, because they know you won't pay off your credit card bill. So I, as a rule, don't have reward cards because I just know that I probably couldn't be trusted with them. That's me. If you're better than that, full credit to you. I didn't mean to pun there, but yeah, I couldn't. But then on those rules, there's a hierarchy here. I'm going to quickly run through. Obviously, always pay off your credit card. The chap last week in his rules said that always pay off your credit card debt every month. Great, do it. If you can't, obviously try and get them on 0%. If you can't clear your credit card every month, then you've got to pay obviously the minimum, but try and pay more than the minimum. And if you're only getting to the minimum, then make sure if the minimum is £50 a month at the moment, obviously as you start to repay that minimum will drop because it's normally a percentage of your bill. Keep it at the 50 because it will make you pay it off quicker, because you'll pay £50 every month rather than 50, then 49 and 48 as it drops down. You'll get there quicker and clear your debt. So that was number 6. Am I doing well here, Andy?
You're doing okay, yeah. We're half an hour in and we're at number 6.
I'll speed these up because the next few are a little bit quicker. Number 7 is be tax efficient but not tax obsessed. Now, when I run anybody's money or look at money, I will try and always minimise the amount of tax you have to pay. By that I mean within the rules and what you're allowed to do. So use your ISA allowances, use your personal tax allowance, make sure you're using your spouses, because obviously now you can share part of it. So you've got to be tax efficient but not tax obsessed. Now there's too many people who are tax obsessed, so they will do things because they can avoid tax or they can try and save it. So they'll make investments that are tax incentivized, but at the same time they've got higher risks related to them in terms of the investments themselves. So don't become tax obsessed. Just use your tax allowances to minimise. Don't pay more tax than you need to. Be flexible, right? Prioritise flexibility in a certain way more than a lot of things. I always try and future-proof what I do. So you always got to think about the future. So if you're going to try and save for your financial freedom or retirement, it doesn't mean you have to do pensions. I would always favour an ISA if I wasn't sure that I could lock the money away, first of all, because you can then always, assuming you've got earnings, flip that into a pension later down the line. So I would always try and keep an element of flexibility. Credit limits. I mean, you might think you cleared a credit card, you want to absolutely cut it up and destroy it, but having access to credit is not a bad thing. It also proves your credit worthiness, but it means that when the boiler does blow up, you have got some money. So,
do you know, Damien? A fascinating thing about that. I don't have a lot of credit cards. I've got a little bit of money on someone on 0%. I don't mind saying that. It helps us as a family. We've managed to, instead of getting a loan, we managed to get 0% credit cards. We overpay, and we've done everything that you say. We keep it at a set amount, and it's great. It works for us. But ever since we've done that, and we've had a couple of small credit cards, everyone is throwing credit cards at us and giving us, because I've got old credit cards from years and years ago, and stupidly I should have cut them up and probably, closed the accounts down. That is the general rule, what you should do if you've got lots open, because it can be a damaging thing having too many. And but I counted up the other day how much credit I could get if I was to phone these companies back and say, yeah, okay, let's take out credit. How much do you think I could get tomorrow? How much money do you think I could get?
I would say 10 grand.
£65,000.
I mean, it's
which is just crazy. It's just crazy.
It's frightening because it's the way the world of finance works. Again, Andy, it's rigged. It is rigged for us all to fail. They keep throwing it at you, make it accessible, and they want you to be able to take money and get into debt. And I know the FCA will come up with these rules to try and minimise that, but it's bollocks. I know I've just sworn now, if that's a swear word, but it is. I mean, they want people to take on more debt because you're not making them any money if you sit there and don't use your credit card. That's why they try and close it down for you.
One credit card sent me a letter saying you have got access to £13,900. How they come up with 13,900, I've got no idea. And the credit card we're talking about, I had years and years and years ago, and it was only at the time for, I think, 1,000 or 2,000. I mean, my credit score is very good. I'm not showing off, but it is because I'm pretty good at paying things off. But it almost made me angry that there's that amount of money that someone is willing to give to me, and they don't even know me. They don't know my situation. And I find that irresponsible.
I think there should be just a flat out rule that they can't offer increases. You have to request every increase in your balance.
Oh, and that's another thing, yeah. The amount of times I get a letter just through the post out of the blue, I haven't asked for it, and they said, just to let you know, we've increased it by another £2,000. And you're thinking, well, that's quite comforting to know, but why are you doing that? And, the cynic in me tells me, because they know I'm a good customer, because I've never not missed a payment, and Christmas coming, and it always seems to be around the Christmas times and the summer holiday times and things like that you suddenly get a letter saying, it's very cheap at the moment.
Well, maybe we should start a campaign, Andy, about stopping it, because do you know what? It always irritates me, and I also think it increases your chances of being a victim of fraud, because I don't like the idea that things keep writing to me with these almost pre-filled applications to say, get a card in the post, because someone could just apply with them, and they're unsolicited, and I think it shouldn't be allowed, even if you have a prior account with them, so you already have an account. I don't think they should be able to do it, but there you go. Right, let me get the last couple out there, Andy. I think you should save and invest. I don't stipulate like the last chap did. You should do 20% of your money, but I'm more of a fan of automating it again, going back to the first rule. Automate, set up a regular amount that's small, and then notch it up if you can. So therefore, look, if you're going to do 50 quid a month, then set a rule that next year you're going to try and see if you can go up by £10, and you just keep doing it. But before you know it, you won't even realise you're saving. And of course, there's some fantastic ideas out there like Save the Change, or ways to automate where your bank will move some money across into a savings account whenever you use your card. There is a positive if you save regularly, that you also smooth the ups and downs in the market, because if the market's going up and down all over the place or suddenly plummets, if you drip in and only buy it on the way in, then each instalment is got less to fall, if that makes sense. You'll eventually be buying at the bottom, whereas if you put in loads of money at the top and the market crashed the next day, then you would be worse off. Of course, the flip is true, that if the market then rockets, you would have wanted to put all your money in. But the point is that for people who just want to get into investing, regular investing is good. And this is, I'm going to say it now, if you want a default plan, if you're going to invest, okay, people are sitting there, and there was a guy on last week's one who did his, always buy a tracker, blah, blah, blah. avoid active funds. That's, again, I don't agree with it. You buy what works, so that can be trackers or it can be ones that have managers, but you need to regularly review them. So my tip is, as a default investment plan, use the age guide. You need to have, so if you're 60 years old, then you need to have 60% of your money in low risk stuff. So that can be cash and possibly bonds or a property, and 40% in the sort of more medium to high risk stuff. Of course, if you're younger, that means you're going to have more in the high risk stuff, but it's based on your age. So therefore, you take your age away from 100, and that's how you get the number. So if you're 40, then you're going to end up having 60% in the high risk stuff, because you've got more time for the stuff to recover. And on that basis, if you've got no other inclination to try and invest the money, then a good default plan is to go for a cheap diversified tracking fund. And things like Vanguard life strategy funds are good. You're not going to necessarily have the best performance, because by definition they track the markets, but they are cheap. So that is a default investment plan if you can't or don't want to try and do better than the market. Of course, I'm a fan of momentum investing, because it takes all the emotion out of it, because that's, again, building a process. You need to take emotion out of money, because money is very emotional. The next point is to always review your portfolios and your money stuff every 6 months to a year, at least a year. And the other thing is to de-risk. Always try and go lower risk. Don't try and go up the risk scale. If you can go lower and achieve the return you need to get your goal, then do so. And by that I mean, if you worked out that you want to be financially free in 20 years' time, and you've worked out how much you're going to need to save a month, or how much you can afford, and how much you need your investment to grow, if that happens to be 4% a year, then why go and try and get 8? Because you don't need to. It's not about what everybody else is doing, it's about what you're doing. And if the way you do that is you invest in cash, brilliant. And yeah, the market might go up 20% when yours is only going up 4%, but it doesn't matter, because you're trying to achieve your goal. And equally, the market could fall 20%, but if you're investing in lower risk stuff, then it won't fall as much. So take actually less risk as possible. I'm a real bird in a hand kind of man. One of my big rules is number 9. Make sure you've got a will, and make sure you've got life insurance that covers your mortgage as a bare minimum, because otherwise your family will be booted out if you die. The last one is really ask why. And this is just a fundamental principle that I think we should all have in life. Whether you're children, you should encourage them to ask why. They go to school and they're told to stop asking why, and sit there and listen and stop questioning everything in a certain way. We all think in the same way, and we're always taught that somebody else has the answer, then we have to listen. It's about asking questions. The world, I'm going to go in a rant here, I can feel it, but the world the world is built around asking. It's about answers, okay? So you can see it. Google is massive. Google is about answers, about how quickly. Why do they tell you that Google's answers a question in 0.00 whatever seconds? I don't care. It's our obsession of finding the answer, when the real skill is not the answer, it's the question. And so you don't always have to know the answer to the question you've got to ask. It's about seeing something and asking why all the time. So you're going to, it could be about money. Ask the question why. If someone's got a product they're trying to sell you, ask why over and over again. Really understand it. If they can't explain it to you, that's not your fault, that's their fault. They can't explain it. Why, if you go back and apply the word why to nearly everything I've talked about, why do you spend so much money on coffee? Why does the bank give me an overdraft when I want one? Why do I only get paid X amount when whatever people in my job get paid more than me? You can keep going through it. Why do I want to drive this car? Why do I need this car? Why? Do you know what I mean? You can keep going through and you apply why back through the whole process. Why do I pay so much on these bills? Is there a way I can get it cheaper? And go all the way through. And it's a good way, a bit like I was saying about that NCT idea. You start again at the beginning. You go round in circles. And if at least once a year, you start this process and keep going through, go through all of those. So you start going back and you start doing that divide and conquer. You start trying to automate and build timing. You start managing expectations. You start focusing on trying to make more money as much as saving it. You focus on value. You try and use credit. Review your way you're using credit. Use it as cash flow. Try and pay it off. Be tax efficient but not obsessed. Be more flexible. Try and save and invest, but don't beat yourself up if you can't, because at the end of the day, if you've got more of a hand-to-mouth existence, that's fine. Because if you apply the other rules and you eventually earn more money and make more money, you'll be able to invest. And make sure You protect your family, wills and insurance. You keep going round in circles, reviewing those things, because don't forget, when you have your next child, you need to end up reviewing your will again. And the final one I'm going to finish on is that obviously you need to know your own limits and what you're comfortable with. You should never ever with money be sat up at night worrying about whether you're making the right decisions. If you're not happy with something, then you should get a financial advisor involved. And there are certain things you should really obviously get them, and you'll know if you need to have a financial advisor because you're spending far too much time Googling or trying to find the answer. So that is normally a surefire way that you need to get a financial advisor in. And my one tip, the guy there on last week's one said, make sure you put the client's best interests ahead of the financial advisor's own interests. And it's very hard to actually find that out. And I did a video, funnily enough, the other day, or not the other day, probably about a year ago now, but the other day, somebody commented on the video, and it sort of brought it back to me what I'd done. And somebody worked in the industry and was saying the point that I made was an important one about the fact that if the way to find a financial advisor like that is if you go and see them and they turn around and tell you that you're best off doing nothing, then you need to make sure you keep that guy's card, because they are the people have got your best interests at heart. Because if they're always trying to sell you a product, then they're salesmen. And there are plenty of financial advisors out there who are not salesmen. You just have to find them. And it may be a recommendation, but there are services like out there, Vouched For is one of them, Unbiased is another, where you can see information about these advisors. And in particular with Vouched For, there are reviews of them and you can see what people think of them as people. So they are my rules, Andy. I hope people enjoy them. They're the general ideas I apply. Feel free to write in and go, where, Damien, what about this? Because obviously I may have overlooked something in some of those, and I'm more than happy to extend my rules. I feel like the 10 Commandments I've just delivered, but they're slightly less important, I suppose, and historic.
Are we going to see these on an index card and see a picture of them sometime soon?
Well, I think I should try. Bearing in mind I've just spent 40 minutes, so 10 minutes longer than a normal show, delivering it. I'm going to have to do some work. But I think I will do. I think I'll try and get them on an index card and send them out into the ether for people to look at. And interestingly, I'm going to try and keep saying we're doing more and more social media stuff. But there's a real theme that we're trying to pull together. You're going to hear me go on about more. And this podcast is very important, and part of it is we need to talk about money more as a nation in all of its guises, whether it's about not necessarily how much you earn, but just talking about money and about things just like interest rates or about the stuff we've talked about, because only then will we be able to defeat the financial illiteracy that we have in this country. And that's not necessarily anybody's fault, that's just the way things are.
Good. Damien, your 10, what are we going to call that? What are we going to say? Your 10 top money tips that you can fit on an index card?
Yeah, I think that's what he called them. Yeah, money rules we'll call them rather than tips. I think people, if they're thinking tips, they think I might be telling them to cut the top of wellies and make them into flower pots. My age old, I hate that sort of, I hate that thing. Yeah, I don't know if anyone, if you've ever done that, I apologise. You probably very nice flower pots, but it's just not me.
Good. If you want to get in touch with Damien, of course you can at the normal place, and that's, we normally say Twitter is a good place if you want to get your questions into Damien. He'll generally get straight back to you. It's at money2themasses with a number 2. But of course, if you've got a slightly longer question, if you want to just get in touch and give us your thoughts or feedback about the show, podcast at moneytothemasses.com.
That's it, we're done, Andy. Make sure you review the show. We need reviews of this show, don't we, Andy? Because it pushes up the iTunes chart. And it's nice to read.
That's it, I think we're done. Until next week.
Until next week.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.